by the hour for a minute or so you can sign off on the towers where they'll piss on your home. And if you feel like you're just powerless to answer them no, it's 'cause you are. They'll gladly pay you by the hour for a minute or so you can sign off on the towers where they'll piss on your home. And if you feel like you're just powerless to answer them no, it's 'cause you are. It's 'cause you are. They'll gladly stagnate a living wage, snap the chains, bury it. Labor slaves in rusty cages dragged behind a chariot, led by Mr. Racial Jungle, Joseph or Iscariot, fighting over scraps as they barrage us all with variants and BuzzFeed clickbait, straight until we're paralyzed, trying to distract us from the concentration camps that Joe had swore he'd close but only chose to amplify, where they got 50-something kids in cages made for 5 to occupy. And no, she hasn't seen the camps, but Harris swears they're paradise. She tells us the facilities are safe, and that right down to the women, they are regularly sterilized. Then she throws her head back and she proceeds to laugh, that sort of heartless cackle you'd expect from someone working steadfastly on behalf of the virus and a Congress full of parasites. And where was I? I was busy cashing every blue check, demonstrating plainly all the narratives expected from the verified. I was busy breeding verbal leeches by the terabyte. Train them to exsanguinate the wealthy while they sleep at night. Bleed the oil barons dry and barren. Say they showed us how to share and now we share alike. Tell them I contracted rabies from a feral mic. Now I'm just another species losing sleep to noise pollution and these glaring lights, forced to change its habits and adapt to just survive. But now it's safe to say that some of us are thriving in the moment, throwing shit on presidential homes beneath the Paris skies. So if you feel like you're just powerless, I guess you bought the lie. But I can tell they're petrified of our collective might, 'cause I can hear those gentrifiers weeping at the sight of our collective rights. And I only can imagine the intensifying fear of knowing revolution's near, and all that's left to do is simply wallow in the thick anticipation of a rabid bite. And baby, one day you can ask your leaders just what that was like before you grab a slice. So if you think you're powerless, allow me now to change your mind. Honey, if you think you're powerless, allow me now to change your mind. See, they'll pay you hourly, tax them each apart, and build a shining tower out of loopholes and cards, and tell you that you're powerless to keep you in the dark, because you aren't, because we aren't. You see, they'll pay you hourly, tax them each apart, and make you build a shining tower out of loopholes and cards, where they'll tell you that you're powerless to keep you in the dark, because you aren't, because we aren't.
Our society and our world are full of these invented and built up and contrived facades. And sometimes some people come along with a hammer and smash that facade. It's a brilliant, powerful hammer. It's a brilliant, powerful hammer to smash that facade. It's a brilliant, powerful hammer to smash that facade.
Welcome to the future. Shit where you please. The Wi-Fi's killer, but there's no more bees. So there's hardly any flowers, there are very few trees, and you'll pay $1,000 for some honey for your tea. But we got these awesome collars, mine's an Apple Model 3. It allows for better movement than the Tesla X Elite. It lets you customize the ads that it implants in every dream. And for premium subscribers, doesn't shock you in your sleep. But it doesn't stop there. It can analyze your speech, and if it hears disinformation, then it notifies police. It's a swift re-education, but it knocks you off your feet like your booster every 7th week. I faced the future boldly with 2 eager open eyes, and I picked a couple nuggets up that blew my fucking mind. Like you can taxidermy someone while they're technically alive, and they'll shine when it's election time. See, the Democratic voter base will pay them zero. Never mind if voting for the scarecrow is a vote along their party lines. They could stare into its marble eyes and claim there's something dignified. Unlike real politicians, this one doesn't need an oxygen or kit supply. But its function is the same as those who came before. The goals are never misaligned. It still spends all its working time performing pre-recorded fleecing sessions where it sugarcoats your slow and hungry genocide, while pouring billions into Nazi coffers, all the while selling you the story that we're moments till the MiGs arrive. So fuck it, ask Zelensky if he'll help replace our leaded pipes. Watch a fleet of Penske's show, stacks of bills in every size. Guess it only took a black sun and a couple Hiles. Honorary goose step and some Nazi boots a quarter mile, all while Biden sneers his sordid smile. I don't know what was in this morning's vial, but it makes him stare 1,000 yards through all the prompters and the cards like he can smell the nearest child. His eyes are wide and wild, wider than the grave in which another 1,000 families were tossed in as I typed until they rose up to the sky unceremoniously piled. Which sort of flies right in the face of all this network ticker tape where the American economy has superhuman vitals.
And sometimes some people come along with a hammer.
See, I like to think my trial's gonna play like a recital. I'll denounce the world around me and accuse the most entitled, who weaponize their titles, whose pull is something tidal, who'd starve us all to death to best delight their blinded idol. So they might destroy the record, and I will never get to vinyl. So my word is not immortal, but it's final.
It's a brilliant, powerful hammer. It's a brilliant, powerful hammer to smash that facade.
They won't let you go, set you free, send you home. Wait, please say you know what you need is what you owed, and they won't let you go, set you free, send you home. I was close enough to smell the fire. Jesus took the wheel and then he kicked me off the ride. I was busy shouting at myself from in the crowd, about to throw down and drag myself outside. I had to give myself the business. When I show myself forgiveness, it goes right between the eyes. Was looking past my shoulder, never focused on the prize. I stalked myself through burning sand, the better part of 40.
Who are these people?
Who are these people? What's up, everyone? It's Indy, as you can probably see from there. But if you're listening on the podcast, you didn't know that. But this is IndieNewsNow live. It's Tuesday night. It's December now. Holy shit. I can't believe we're already into December. How did this year fly by so fast? There's a lot happening right now out there in the world, and it's hard to keep track of it all. I had a conversation yesterday. I don't know, a lot of you who are in chat now saw it last night with Ryan Christian from The Last American Vagabond. That was an INN one-on-one exclusive that we did yesterday, kind of surprise. And we talked a little bit about just kind of how much they're throwing at us and how hard it is to vet a source these days, because it's so hard to get it all right these days. There's so many ops and so many distractions and so many curveballs being thrown at us that they're counting on the fact that we can't possibly pay attention to all of it, and some of it's going to slide by. And then it's about, well, how much do you actually forgive? Because we're all human. Everybody makes mistakes, of course, but and it was a fascinating cover. I love talking to that guy. He's a wealth of knowledge. He's the kind of guy that I model myself after, the way that he does his research, the way that he questions everything, the way he meticulously sources things and relies on that sourcing. And it's like, well, until new information comes into light, I have to believe that this is what it is. But until then, until something changes. So it's given the best information available. And it's hard to tell sometimes, especially because there's a lot of people that are being fed information and get a lot of things right, but occasionally don't. And that's by design, at least the people that are feeding them information. I don't know if I mentioned to Ryan the Stockwell thing, back that CIA co-opts journalists by feeding them stories, but that 1 out of every 5 or 6 is going to be a false flag, is going to be a bogus story. But most of the time they do good work. So they can't really be criticized because, well, they break stories, etc. How do you draw the line and where do you take that? That's funny. Everybody's saying that their stream was freezing. I noticed it on Twitter. It was also freezing. And now I also see that the how do we miss that thing is live for some reason underneath. Okay. Interesting. Technical stuff. All right, let me fix that before we continue, or it's going to bug me the whole time. Just to continue to talk about what's going on in the world, you've got, again, Ukraine happening, China, Taiwan happening. That's a constant at this point. What's going on in India, and that Imran Khan has been missing now, I guess, for how long? Weeks that nobody's seen or heard from him. So that's not good. Then you've got what's going on in South America, and that's what we're going to talk about tonight. And I think that that's honestly where they're trying to push the focus is, okay, here we go. Come on. Is this it? No, that's not it. Is this it? Yay. Okay. We got what we wanted. Thank you. All right. Now we can get to stories because that was bothering me. I added a hashtag justice for Aspen. By the way, this is Giving Tuesday. So if you are able to, there's a series of GoFundMes that we've been showcasing for weeks. Okay, so GoStart says it's been 1 month. Imran Khan. 1 month already. Nobody's heard from him, even his family. He's been disappeared in a Pakistani prison. So I was just going on, and again, you've got the thing going on in Ecuador and Central America, plus the thing going on in Venezuela that we're going to talk about. Argentina is broke and getting $40 billion from the IMF. Canada is having a whole thing right now with a pipeline, and Alberta. There is stuff happening everywhere, it seems. And is that by design, again, so that we can't pay attention to all of it, and so that we can't get our head around what the right story is and who's messing around with it to manufacture that story to happen the way it is? It's really fascinating stuff. Before we get started, I know it's Giving Tuesday, and there are other people that I'd like to showcase and support, and we're going to get to them later on. But we also could use some support at INN. Cash App, $ Indie News Network. We've got ko-fi.com/Indie News Network. We got paypal.me/Indie News Network. IndieNewsNow.com. And then over at Substack, we're live at IndieMediaToday.com. Shout out to everyone over there. And INNNewsletter.com, where, again, you can find that one-on-one with Ryan, Christian, and I ad-free. Ryan, of course, is an Indie Media Award honoree. So I also reached out to my cable company, and I upgraded my internet. So hopefully my upload speed doubled, and it's been holding in consistently a little bit faster. My hope is that we should not, knock on wood, see very many hiccups. Hopefully, that's my hope. So I've got a whole host of stories here tonight. Of course, we got a Fuck Israel segment, because we always have to have a Fuck Israel segment. But we're going to start with what's going on in Venezuela. And Venezuela is something that we've been talking about for months. And I'm proud that we've been talking about that for months. And we're kind of ahead of the story, thanks to the people at Anti-War and all the sources that we follow, the independent sources that have not taken their eye off that ball. But I start with Indie Media Award honoree Matt Kennard, formerly of Declassified UK, co-founder, and now he's just on his own as an independent. Not a single plane flying over Venezuela, a country of 30 million people with the world's largest oil reserves. Its airspace has been closed by the U.S. president sitting in the White House 2,000 miles away. International law is a chimera. The world is run like a mafia, and Washington is the Don. And there's all the planes showing all around Venezuela's airspace. Right down to there. That is, wow. Because if you fly over there, there's a chance that you may end up shot down. And nobody wants to have their plane shot down. That Trump or the White House or the administration put out an edict to all the commercial airliners saying don't fly into Caracas. That's a major world capital. That should not be allowed to happen. This is an act of war. That's the way I see this. By shutting down somebody else's airspace, that's an act of war. So I went to another Indie Media Award honoree, Popular Resistance. And they're also a 501c, and they're looking for funding. Everybody really is looking for funding today on Giving Tuesday. But this article by Roger D. Harris from literally yesterday, that Trump commands Venezuela's heavens closed. Okay. U.S. President Donald Trump ordered the airspace above and surrounding Venezuela closed in its entirety on November 29th. Yet the U.S. has as much legal and moral authority to shutter the skies over Venezuela as the Venezuelans do to close the putting greens at Mar-a-Lago. Yes, that's ridiculous. But not any more so than D.C.'s phony pretext of drug interdiction for their deadly regime change operation against Venezuela. It's nuts. To date, where are we? The Yankee military has murdered over 80 people in alleged drug boats in the Southern Caribbean and Eastern Pacific, but has yet to confiscate a single milligram of narcotics from Venezuela. Strange. The Venezuelan authorities, in contrast, have seized 64 tons of cocaine this year that were being transited through their country and have done so without killing a single person, because killing them was the plan in the first place. However, Venezuela's interdiction pales in comparison to the 400 tons of cocaine smuggled into the U.S., enabled by Juan Orlando Hernandez, according to the Department of Justice. He's a former Honduran president and a right-wing Washington ally. He was convicted in a U.S. jury trial for running his country like a narco state, taking bribes from the Sinaloa cartel kingpin El Chapo, like literally Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. The day before Trump closed Venezuela's airspace as part of his so-called crackdown on drug cartels, he announced his intention to pardon that convicted cartel enabler, who's serving a 45-year sentence in a penitentiary in West Virginia. I thought it was Virginia, but neither here nor there. If Washington succeeds at blocking air travel to Venezuela, which it has, the action has an added cruelty because it coincides with the winter holidays when overseas Venezuelans would return home to visit family. Many of these migrants are economic refugees driven from their homeland largely by the U.S.'s unilateral coercive measures designed to asphyxiate Venezuela's economy. The CEO of America's empire has ambitions for vast powers and now claims dominion over the firmaments. Yet, the U.S. Congress has not approved his no-fly zone, not like they have to. We talked about that last week. Nor has any international authority such as the UN, and certainly not the host country, which, under international law, quote-unquote, whatever that means, has sole control over its own airspace. Yes, act of war. Even David Deptula, the retired general who enforced a no-fly zone in Iraq, questioned Trump's declaration. Such an act constitutes a blockade and is, as such, considered an act of war. Somewhere I said that. More precisely, an escalation of an ongoing hybrid war against Venezuela. Again, because we want the oil, we're taking the oil, it's all about the oil.
Thank you very much. That's really nice. Thank you.
No, it's not really nice at all. This offensive has taken many forms: unilateral economic sanctions, coup and assassination attempts, a dual government, diplomatic intrigue, election interference, an astroturfed opposition, and a psychological pressure campaign by a compliant corporate press. Holy shit. The hybrid war is as deadly as a hot war, having taken over 100,000 lives by denying essential food, medicines, and fuel to the most vulnerable, according to a UN special rapporteur. Okay. Washington's quarter-century siege of Venezuela has failed in its objective of regime change so far. For the imperial hegemon, the success of the Venezuelan resistance has led it to push its campaign to the brink of military invasion, with the no-fly zone declaration serving as an ominous harbinger. They've been saying that they're going to send ground troops in there. It's just a question of when. I mean, they're trying to antagonize, I believe, in order to provoke a response so that they can then claim that they were unprovoked and that they were attacked unprovoked, which is hilarious. The political leadership of Venezuela's Bolivarian revolution includes Maduro, Interior Minister Diosdado Cabello, no relation to Kit, and Defense Minister Vladimir Padrino Lopez. These officials are distasteful to Trump and Rubio. The State Department designated them as leaders of a foreign terrorist organization, the Cartel de los Soles, that doesn't really exist. But then again, the current U.S. president is distasteful to 60% of his constituents, and the so-called Cartel de los Soles doesn't exist, as I just said. And that's a link to an anti-war article about that. In 2002, the U.S. backed an abortive coup that attempted to overthrow then-President of Venezuela, Hugo Chavez, who was restored to power by a spontaneous uprising of the people. That event had a century-old precedent, as Venezuelan-Canadian sociologist Maria Paez-Victor recalls, that in 1902, English and German gunboats attacked Venezuela with their Marines invaded. The Europeans were demanding payment of outrageous loans that their banks had forced upon the country. The president at the time, Cipriano Castro, had no money and had hardly any armed forces, but he appealed directly to the people in a proclamation that became a historic monument to the love of Venezuelans for their country. Its opening sentence is a call to defend the land from invaders. Venezuelans, the insolent foot of the stranger has profaned the sacred soil of our homeland, quote unquote. People rushed with whatever arms they could lay their hands on. Even our newly sainted Dr. Jose Gregorio Hernandez, a veritable man of peace, rushed to give aid to the wounded. Foreign Marines were routed. They never expected such a firm, unbeatable stand. They thought it would be a piece of cake. They were deadly wrong. When was the last time we invaded somewhere and it didn't result in disaster and sustained long-term expense and troops left? Insane. DC now stands at the crossroads of its own making. Having failed to crush Venezuela through all these different measures, it now toys with measures that violate the zone of peace proclaimed by the 33 members of the community of the Latin American states and Caribbean states. That's CELAC. 33, that's an interesting number. I wonder how they came up with that number. The U.S. attempt to impose a no-fly zone exposes a desperate imperial drive for domination. I mean, desperate, sure, but it's certainly muscling and strong-arming, and it seems to be working. The Bolivarian Revolution, having endured more than 25 years of siege, remains rooted in the same collective resolve that once repelled foreign gunboats and reversed the 2002 coup. I sure hope so. Should DC escalate further, it will not confront a compliant colony, but a nation prepared to defend its airspace, institutions, and sovereignty, joined by a genuine international community in solidarity. So far, the international community has not been joining them in solidarity, and they have not done anything to defend their airspace, to my knowledge, to this point. So this is flowery and hopeful and rose-colored glasses. Roger Harris concludes with, meanwhile, CNN reports massive disapproval of Trump's Venezuela policy, of course, and the Simón Bolívar Airport was operating normally as of the time that was written. Massive disapproval of Trump's Venezuela policy. He doesn't give a shit. He's already won his last election. And I don't believe the Steve Bannon stuff. He doesn't care. All he cares about at this point is enriching his own family and making sure that they get out of this presidency with no lawfare attached to them and set up to support their benefactors for the next couple of decades, because the Democrats are a complete mess on top of it. Nobody else can get their stuff together. These guys have bought off half the election software already, and they have people in a lot of positions of power, including 2/3 of the Supreme Court. So they should be able to run the table for a while, unfortunately, if you look at it from an objective perspective.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs.
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, some people said they were. I don't know if that's really the case or not, but that certainly was Trump's point at the debates, and it got people's attention. It certainly worked. He's a carnival barker, I'll tell you that. Well, positions like that certainly won't get us remonetized. Wow. Sorry. Won't get us remonetized by YouTube. I just saw something put up there. Let me get through this. Support independent media because we need it more than ever. My slider's missing now. All right. That's okay. Those are the people that support our network. The ways to support our Cash App, $ Indie News Network. We do ko-fi.com/Indie News Network. Got paypal.me/Indie News Network. IndieNewsNow.com. We're live over there right now. That's our website. INNnewsletter.com is our weekly newsletter for the network that we're part of. And then IndieMediaToday.com. That's where we're live right now. That's my Substack. All the clips from this show go live over there on a daily basis. Original articles. I actually, again, wrote one last week about the state of labor reporting in this country, which sadly is pretty bad, in my opinion. But I did want to put this up that I saw Talking Wombat. It's important to note that China is presently Venezuela's #1 oil customer. Do you think that provides the U.S. any impetus to control Venezuelan oil? Maybe, but I think that, yeah, definitely they want it instead of China. They want to be able to control world oil pricing. Go start over on Rumble. Also, Imran Khan's family clarifies that he is not dead amid swirling rumors. That's good. He has alleged that he's being brutalized inside the prison, supposedly on the orders of the army chief, and that's not good. But it's glad to hear that he's actually alive. And Dissent in Bloom was saying the same thing, that it gives them leverage over China, who imports most of Venezuela's crude. Agreed. That is a benefit. But I think that the big part of it is that the U.S. oil companies want access to those reserves first and foremost. They want to tap that. And they want to be able to set the global price and control the global price of oil and be able to manipulate it as much as possible based on what they're buying. So, fuck the Trump administration for that. Desert Mantis is over on Odyssey. I've got Odyssey working. And yes, we can put Odyssey chats up here. We can put Substack chats up here. I'm going to do a tech tips show on Thursday night. And I'm going to show you the tool that I use to do that called Social Streams. Very cool. Neilio Nostrum, welcome to the stream, sir. Yes, we could do better reporting on labor issues. It's a depressing topic. The working class is not so proletarian as we would like. The unions are a mess. The unionized are willfully ignorant. Totally agree with all that. But what's missing in my mind is the perspective of the worker. Not enough people are talking to the people that are actually making the things, that are on the factory floor. And the managers that are on the factory floor that aren't necessarily the union leadership that are seeing the real problems every day. They want to tap that. Yes, they want to tap that oil. They want to tap that oil, but it's very dirty oil. It's very dirty. It needs to be refined. We have to refine it. It's very sandy, very dirty oil. Very dirty. Odyssey did stop taking USD. That's an interesting thing we can talk about on Thursday night as well. That this new move that they're going toward USDC, which is Circle, and toward a new crypto platform. I talked with Ryan a little bit about it. They're working with the Independent Media Alliance to set up what their new thing called Portal. And that is very similar to Substack, is actually, it's my understanding, in that you're going to be able to publish and live stream, and it'll be more video focused than writing, but still you'll be able to write. I think you can do it there now if you want. But I did want to get to talking about Ecuador. And I don't know much about Ecuador, I'll be honest. This is Honduras. This one isn't even Ecuador, but it's election interference in down in Central America. See, I don't even know which story I was talking about. Ecuador is a whole other thing. But Honduras, I rely on Arturo Dominguez, decolonized journalism, for reporting when it comes to South and Central America, Latino perspective, Latin American perspective. He's got family of all shapes, sizes, and colors, he claims. And he says, And I think that he's got a really interesting independent perspective. He's written for Unicorn Riot and other independent outlets as well. But support him. I'm a paid subscriber over at Decolonized Journalism. All right. And he writes that the U.S. is being called out for election interference in Honduras. All right. And here's why candidates in Honduras's upcoming elections are calling out the U.S. for interference. What? Go figure. I'll give you two guesses. Maybe it's because they want to put an Israel-friendly puppet that will do whatever the CIA wants them to in U.S. government. Maybe. Let's see. On Thursday, the House Foreign Affairs Western Hemisphere Subcommittee held a hearing called Democracy in Peril, the Fight for Free Elections in Honduras. The hearing was suspiciously broadcast to Honduras. The subcommittee chair and anti-Cuba hardliner Maria Elvira Salazar from Florida is no stranger to meddling in Latin American countries' internal affairs and insulting world leaders that she disagrees with. She, like most in Congress, believes that she has the power to dictate what other countries should do and who should lead them. I love that. In the first few minutes, Salazar highlights her bullying style of diplomacy while spreading misinformation and making unsubstantiated allegations against many leaders and candidates in Honduras' elections. What becomes very clear from the very beginning was that she was promoting her preferred candidate while declaring, I'm not telling you who to vote for. And I'm not going to play the tell us her stuff. So he talks a little bit about the candidates here. Okay, Ricky Moncada of the Libre Party is hated by Salazar, is a close ally of the current president, and promises to continue Honduras' social programs, reform the country's economic system, which only benefits the 10 wealthiest families in the country, and they want to expand access to credit and promote inclusive development. All good things for the citizens, you would think. But of course, Salazar can't stand that. Nasri Tito Asfura wants to bring in private investment to promote infrastructure development and modernize the country's ports. He's also pledged to create more jobs and argues that migrants are being repatriated from the U.S. will stimulate Honduras' economy. He plans to foster U.S.-Honduras trade relations. So guess which one they like? I'm guessing they like him. Then we got Salvador Nasrallah. He wants to create more jobs by implementing fiscal policies to stimulate investment. He also wants to decentralize the government like Milei did in Argentina. We know how well that worked. And promote tourism, invest in infrastructure projects, and adopt a Bukele-style law enforcement model. That's also sad and a little scary. And that apparently is who Salazar favors in Honduras' elections. I would think that it would be this guy, but apparently that's not good enough. Salazar opened the meeting by comparing the current Honduran president, Xiomara Castro, to what she declares to be murderous dictators who were elected into office. Weird. Not only does she insult respected leaders in their respective countries, but also the voters who elected them. Sure. What she does and how she promotes U.S. interventionism is ignored in the U.S. media, but her polarized and hyperbolic rhetoric does not go unnoticed in Latin America. Ranking member Joaquin Castro called out the White House for cutting funding to agencies that have long been involved in undermining democracy in other countries. That's weird. While Castro highlighted some of the same problems as Salazar and cast doubt about the legitimacy of the upcoming elections, of course he did. Okay, he ended his upcoming remarks by highlighting how Hondurans are mobilizing and suggesting that their votes are being chilled. Are being killed at all? I don't get that. One of the speakers, Carlos Trujillo, was the U.S. ambassador to the OAS under the Trump administration. Oh, boy. And he was involved in the 2019 Bolivian presidential election crisis, when he pushed the OAS election monitoring team to report widespread fraud. His actions contributed to the coup of then-President Evo Morales, which led Elon Musk on Twitter to then say, "We can coup whoever we want." Morales was promptly re-elected in later elections. So they called a fraud. There wasn't a fraud. They had a re-vote, and Morales ended up winning again. Trujillo's involvement in Bolivia's elections highlights just how easily the U.S. will declare electoral fraud in Latin America and manufacture evidence to make its case. Additionally, he supported additional sanctions against Cuba that were referred to as lethal. Again, they just want a puppet, somebody that will go along and sign off on whatever the U.S. wants to do. His appearance at the hearing was intentional due to his specific bias against much of Latin America and its leaders. Trujillo, who is a registered foreign agent with business interests in Honduras, was challenged by Castro, who gave him a hard time about his conflicts of interest. I think this is from C-SPAN.
You know, on these kinds of hearings, one of the disadvantages that we have here when you're not in the country that we're discussing is that we're not on the ground. We're not in the middle of the action, so to speak. And so we rely on witnesses and experts and others to come and tell us, based on their expertise, what's going on. And it's hard sometimes to sort out what's fact and fiction or exaggeration or hyperbole, you know, and you probably can never be 100% certain of anything that you hear. But I wanted to start with you, Ambassador Trujillo, because you did mention conflicts of interest with the Attorney General and so forth. And I want to commend you for your service as Ambassador, U.S. Ambassador to the OAS. But also want to ask you about conflicts of interest that you have sitting here today. You are a registered foreign agent, is that correct?
That is correct, but not in Honduras.
You represent the Dominican Republic, Haiti, Guyana, Japan, and Bosnia, is that correct?
And Kenya as well.
And Kenya. You also have, you and your firm have significant corporate clients in Honduras who are actively working against the sitting government, is that correct?
That's not correct.
You have clients in Honduras.
I do have clients in Honduras.
You represent Prospera Honduras?
I do no longer represent Prospera Honduras.
Does your firm still represent Prospera Honduras?
We do not represent Prospera Honduras.
When did you represent them? For what period of time?
Prior to the Trump administration, probably through, it was one of my partners in my firm, probably through the first quarter of this year.
You also represent two financial institutions in Honduras, you or your firm?
They're all over Central America, yes.
And so I want to ask you, did you discuss your upcoming testimony with any of your clients before this hearing?
I have not.
Did you get advice?
Ranking member, I'm sorry I'm interrupting. I think we're here for just one purpose, to assure that November 30th are clean and fair elections in Honduras. Ambassador Trujillo may have many clients in Honduras, but that does not mean that he does not want the best outcome on November 30th. So I would think we should just concentrate on finding out what's really happening right now and how we can preserve the integrity of those elections.
Oh, Chairwoman, I've never interrupted your time, and you've never interrupted my time. And these are fair questions about a witness, especially when the witness talked about conflicts of interest of others in Honduras. I think it's fair to consider whether there's conflicts of interest being presented to us here today. And so that's why I asked him about the clients that he represented, including Prospera, which was very controversial in Honduras, which was fighting with the government there, involved in litigation and later arbitration. I think that's a significant perspective, and obviously one that you've chosen to discuss this, but I think that folks need to know that. I think that's important.
Well, if you're insinuating, just to be clear, Ranking
Sure.
Member, if you're insinuating that my testimony here is tainted, because 9 months ago I represented, and I didn't even personally represent it, my firm represented Honduras Prospera, which is another asset, American asset by the way, that was sequestered and taken away by this government and is actually being actively supported not only by the Biden State Department, but also by the Trump one, If you're insinuating that that somehow taints my testimony, it's factually inaccurate.
No, Ambassador, I commended you for your service as ambassador to OAS. I'm not saying that your testimony is tainted, but I want there to be a full understanding about your perspective as a witness. It's very rare that we have a registered foreign agent and a registered lobbyist sit in that chair where you're sitting. That almost never happens. So when it does, I think it's important to discuss that.
And yes, KYE, welcome. He said Tate. Yes, he did say a Tate. Oh my God. Now we're going to have to clip that. But yes, there's a massive conflict of interest. And notice that he also said that he represents Prospera. All right. If you go back yesterday, Prospera is one of the things that Ryan Christian from The Last American Vagabond, who I had a one-on-one with yesterday, said the American public is not really paying close enough attention to. And it's corporate-run cities and corporate-run entities, municipalities or states or countries where they get to determine the law. And it's really frightening. So to continue with Arturo's story here about potential interference in Honduras's elections. So that guy represented some interests in Honduras, is what Castro's claiming. Deborah Ulmer, the regional director for Latin America and Caribbean programs from the NDI. Okay, the NDI's parent company is the NED, boo, which for all intents and purposes runs covert operations to undermine elections that were once conducted by the CIA. In 2001, NED was implicated in funding groups in Venezuela that would later attempt to oust then-President Hugo Chavez. The NDI was incriminated in attempting to undermine Maduro's government in 2013 and 15 following Chavez's death. Other groups under NED's umbrella are the International Republican Institute, the IRI, and Freedom House. Remember these names. While they maintain that they are non-profit, non-governmental agencies, that's the NGO world, the bulk of their funding comes directly from agencies funded by the U.S. Congress, such as the NED and USAID until Trump shut it down, State Department, which is where they're now getting the money from, and the Consortium for Elections and Political Process Strengthening. That is shady as fuck. What do they even need that for? All of which have been involved in coups, attempted coups, and casting doubt about elections all over the world. By the way, we reported a couple of weeks ago that Edison Research, what's the major exit polling company, was just sold to a much larger market research firm. Enrique Roig, Vice President of External Affairs at Human Rights First, laid much of the concern about the Honduran election on the Trump administration's cuts to the aforementioned problematic agencies, suggesting that the doubts being cast largely stem from the U.S. and hearings such as the one he's participating in. Sure, they're the ones that are causing the problem, so yes. While Roig criticized the White House, he appeared more concerned with the agencies behind coups all over the world not having the money to do what he expects them to do in Honduras. I don't want them cooing governments all over the world. Sorry. All right. And how this is a longer about 2 minutes.
Both of you emphasize the importance of independent electoral institutions. Given the deadlock inside the National Electoral Council and the political pressure facing the Tribunal for Electoral Justice, what are the most urgent steps Honduras must take in the next 10 days to restore minimum public confidence in these institutions? There's 10 days left. What has to happen?
Thank you. The independence of the Honduran electoral institutions are vital. And that is not only of the National Electoral Council, but it's also the Electoral Justice Tribunal. They both have important results. One who administers the results, the other who adjudicates any challenges. But it's critical that these institutions are able to fulfill their mandates and ensure credible and transparent elections. I commend the CNE for accrediting, I think, a record number of domestic observers. The Hondurans are doing their part. They have come together, and thousands of volunteer observers have come together to provide oversight and to protect the will of the people. I also commend the private sector for stepping in and providing funding for these observation efforts.
Mr. Roy, if I could just get a quick answer there.
Yeah, in terms, Ranking Member, in terms of what more we can be doing, having worked at the State Department, I would say at this stage it's really important that the State Department be much more vocal between now and November 30th. The silence has been deafening, and so to the extent, I know you tried to get a witness here today, but I think that the State Department has a critical role to play in demonstrating that it is watching what's happening and showing vigilance over this process.
Why?
And so I would hope that they would take that to heart.
How is it any of our business?
Thank you.
Wait a minute. Okay, so that guy is clearly a spook, by the way. He's a spy. All right, he's a State Department version of a spy. That's what spies look like now. They have nice hair, and they wear ties, and they sit in hearings, and they sound very professional. That guy's a fucking spy. That guy destabilizes governments and spends our money to do so, and then acts like he's legitimate. While the speakers discussed distrust and possible election rigging, it should be noted that all three candidates are accusing each other of unethical and illegal behavior, and the vast majority of it is misinformation. Many of these allegations have led to legal action, thus creating an environment of distrust. The problem exemplified by everyone at the hearing is that they expect elections to be like those in the U.S., openly corrupt and bought by corporations. When a country does things differently, there will always be opposition from lawmakers who are influenced by biased and dishonest brokers who operate with ulterior motives tied directly to their funding. Nah, you don't say. The hearing last week laid the groundwork for casting doubt about elections from outside forces, creating a pretext to intervene while also campaigning for the U.S.'s chosen candidate. This is the playbook of what they're doing in Venezuela, too, with Machado. Meanwhile, Honduran President Xiomara Castro, who was being villainized in the subcommittee hearing, has a 64% approval rating, which is the lowest of her term. She's been incredibly popular. But why we're having this level of intervention in an election in Honduras is an entire other question. Why are we that involved? We shouldn't be. But part of it, like Ryan was talking about, is this whole Prospera thing. So there's been all these lawsuits over, you got to watch the thing, and I didn't even really get exactly what he was saying, but that they set up this corporate city or this corporate entity, but then the government didn't want to continue to extend licenses and whatever, so the entity ended up suing the government, and this is all tied up in lawsuits, for as much as a third of the GDP of Honduras to begin with. So if they lose, they have to basically hand over all the assets of the country to the Prospera owners anyway, which are all, by the way, it's like Peter Thiel and BlackRock and all these private big money investors. It's, call it a 15-minute city or whatever. It's their vision of the future. That's really funny. Dissent in Bloom said that Consortium for Elections and Political Process Strengthening sounds like a spell from Harry Potter, but okay, maybe, or some kind of a magical, an office within the Ministry of Magic. I think that's what Topher said. Yes, Lady Alex M., I'm sick of the U.S. imposing itself on sovereign nations. Why the fuck are we there? None of our business. It was created by the wizard, by Cash the Wizard. Cash App PayPal ain't creating anything except for honeypots, or at least falling for it. Right. I'm so glad we paid so little so these kinds of people can get paid so much to sit around and provide us this tantalizing theater. It's disgusting, really. I agree. All right. State Department is busy planning a coup in Venezuela. That might be why they didn't have more interference in the Honduran election, but apparently they did anyway, and they don't need much. Okay, hey, we're all family here. This is a family show. There are no racial slurs. Hey, I don't want to hear any of that stuff. Thank you. All right. U.S. is the most tyrannical nation on earth, is telling who to do what. Yeah, exactly. Right. And calling them tyranny and meanwhile, Desert Mantis, how did our elections in 2020 work out? And maybe even 2024? Right. Honduran elections should not be the subject of a U.S. hearing. Totally agree with that, too. Right? Fucking muggles, right? Back to the Harry Potter thing. That's right, Topher. Right? But CIA continues to do what CIA continues to do. So, oh my God. Well, yes. No, that is also the terminology for a spy, but come on, man. That's not what that was about. It's about spy. Family show, damn it. Thank you. Family show. Yes. Some of my best friends are black. That's what I was gonna pull that one of those. Colin, he's a member of this network. He'll be live tomorrow night with Reef, I hope. Last I heard, they were going to be doing a show. But yes, not racial. That's a spy thing. All right. Oh yeah, that's right. There was one other thing. So Matt Gaetz, for some reason, so Fiorella has an opinion about what happened in Honduras, right? Let me go back here and show this, because this is funny. Breaking, according to ground reports we unfortunately predicted, an electoral U.S.-backed coup attempt is underway in Honduras. The Honduran right wing has reportedly infiltrated the CNE as they fuel a victory with only 30% of the vote counts scrutinized. Right, they're predicting victory. Matt Gaetz, of all people, former congressman, you can see I have him blocked, but I viewed this because I wanted to see it. No, the people rose up and rejected socialism. Hold on. Wait, I've got something here for Mr. Gaetz.
I am Cornholio. Are you threatening me?
Yeah, he's butthead, that guy. So Fiorella answers him that, hey, answer me this. Why did Trump, who's fighting the narco drug war by bombing fishermen off an oil and mineral rich Venezuela's coast and is threatening Maduro, why did he just happen to pardon that former narco dictator right before Honduras's election? Weird. Also, why does Matt Gaetz have the same foreign policy as corrupt Democrats like Obama and crooked Hillary, whose administration ousted former President Manuel Zelaya from Honduras in 2009 and created the narco state, which then led to mass border and migration issues from 16 to 20? What, you now want to do it again? Everyone knows the playbook. Hating socialism is irrelevant. By the way, Honduras wasn't socialist, but not your monkey, not your circus. Stop interfering in sovereign countries, then crying when you get blowback. And the blowback is still minimal, honestly. Pasta even weighs in. Matt, have you ever even been to Honduras? Which reminded me, honestly, of the Douglas Murray. Have you ever even been? Have you ever been, sir? You're missing the bigger picture. People there don't view socialism through a simplistic American lens, whatever that means, because Americans don't even really know what socialism is, at least most of them. Their form of socialism is collective, pooling resources for social programs that benefit the majority and combat American imperialism. A visit to Honduras would give you a clearer perspective. What we're seeing is another U.S. coup. So, yes, Pasta, agreed. Friend of the show, Indie Media Award honorees, Pasta and Fiorella from Truthwire. It is a U.S.-backed coup. That's what we're seeing. According to GoStart, there is still no official winner in the presidential elections. With 68% counted, Nasrallah leads with 40%, followed by Asfura with 39.71, according to Grok. Grok, is this true? No. I don't believe any of it right now. I don't believe the counting software. I believe we're going to get whatever puppet they decide they want to put in power, and the people will tolerate. if it doesn't cause a mass uprising, that's who they're going to end up with. My guess is that it will be either Nasrallah or Asfura, and either way, it's going to be better for the private land developers and not necessarily for the citizens of Honduras, according to what I'm hearing. Again, I'm no expert on Honduras. I rely on the people who report on the region, who know the people in the region, who have connections in the region. People like Fiorella, people like Arturo Dominguez, so support independent media. That's what we do here. These people have already done that, and they're supporting INN. They've thrown us a couple of bucks. Thank you to everybody who's done so. And recently we had Wishigo and Donna Everett. And just this past week, I saw that Kieran hooked us up and Topher hooked us back up. And everybody has been so generous. Thank you. Again, it's Giving Tuesday. So if you're able to, again, Cash App $, Indie News Network. Ko-fi.com/Indie News Network. Then we got paypal.me/Indie News Network. Name of the show is Indie News Now Live. We actually have a website called IndieNewsNow.com. You can go there, read a whole bunch of independent news, ad-free, watch this show live on a section that says Watch Live. You can get merch. There's a link to the merch stuff. There's a link to more of about the network. And then you can even break the content down by videos or articles or just podcasts to listen to. So really cool stuff over at Indie News Now. We're live over on Substack, also at IndieMediaToday.com. And I also publish INN newsletter for Indie News Network. So you can subscribe to either one of those places, support with a monthly or annual contribution to either one of those. Thank you, really, to everyone that does that. Descent in Bloom also hooked it up last week. She's in chat. Thank you, Descent in Bloom, who's also an incredible independent journalist and supports this network that amplifies independent journalists. So really gracious and deeply appreciate that. No, we're going to get to Chanda on her GoFundMe tonight. I have a whole section at the end of the show where we're going to get to GoFundMes for Chanda. We're going to get to a GoFundMe for Aspen Martin, Halo Benson's daughter, and then also for Nataliya, Anthony Malecki's sister-in-law. We've been talking about them every week, and we're going to continue to. Also to reinstate Charlie Mack's account. Yeah, we love Chanda. And Chanda was home for Thanksgiving. I've got some pictures and some Facebook posts from Thanksgiving. Fuck cancer. That's right, Sean. Sean would know too. But I've got some actually like happy pictures and a little bit of positive news, considering, it's as good as we can hope for. Every day is going to be a challenge, and we never know what we're going to get. All right. Time for Fuck Israel. Reeve said that I should actually ask Jesse Jett to make me a Fuck Israel little intro vignette thing so that I can play that every time he had started to do some lounge music. I wasn't thrilled with that, but it would be funny to have something because we do have to do this segment every week. And I've got a few things that are just absolutely fucking horrific. So we'll start with Professor Asal Rod. She's outstanding independent journalist as well. She loves to correct the headlines in corporate media. And apparently the orders went out last week. And we're going to talk a little bit about this story. But Israeli forces kill 2 Palestinians after they appear to surrender. And there was a lot of coverage about this. I'm pretty sure I brought an article that actually details what happened here. This was in Jenin in the West Bank. Remember, there's no Hamas here. This is the West Bank. So they surrendered. You could see the video clearly. They have their hands in the air. Soldiers are behind them. They kick them, and then they shoot them in the back, and they kill them. But the orders went out to corporate media, but for some reason they appeared to surrender. They didn't appear to surrender. No, they fucking surrendered. But somehow Reuters, the BBC, the New York Times, they all, for some reason, it appeared to surrender. WAPO, too. Fuck all you guys. This is why corporate media is garbage. Right? To cast doubt. 2 Palestinians were executed in Jenin this morning. All right? After surrendering, none of the soldiers flinched. Business as usual. Here it is. They order them to get back onto the thing, And as they're climbing back under, they shoot them. Then they put their hands up like, what do you mean? What happened? Then they use their heavy equipment to pull the door right down on top of them, just in case they weren't already dead. And there's still guns drawn as if these guys are going to pop up and shoot them. Out of their fucking minds, these people. Unspooled. All right. Fuck Israel. All right. But on top of that, this is one you probably didn't hear. The IDF also murdered 2 kids in Khan Yunis. That's in Gaza. That's inside Gaza. Wait, isn't there supposed to be a ceasefire happening? Huh? The Israeli army continued its violations of the declared ceasefire in the Gaza Strip, killing 2 Palestinian siblings, both are children, and bombarding several areas of the devastated coastal enclave. Medical sources in Bani Sohelia, east of Khan Yunis, reported that Israeli forces opened heavy fire on displaced Palestinians, killing 2 children instantly. But if there was a ceasefire, how could they open heavy fire? Oh, right, because they don't really adhere to a ceasefire. Sources confirmed that the victims were among families who had already fled earlier bombardments and were sheltering in makeshift tents, because everybody was. The 2 slain children have been identified as Tamer and Bis' brother Tamer and his brother Tamer Abu Aasi. They were killed near the Al-Farabi school in Bani Sohelia. I saw Mossab Abu Toha also share this. The Israeli Air Force also launched massive missile strikes while artillery units fired shells at neighborhoods east of Khan Yunis. But again, ceasefire, right, guys? In addition, Israeli Navy vessels opened fire on displaced Palestinians near the shore of Rafah, Gaza's southernmost city. Why? Forcing hundreds to scatter from the beaches where they had sought refuge. And we saw the tents lined up on the beaches. Civil defense crews reported difficulty reaching the wounded due to the ongoing shelling and destruction of access roads. Well, that makes sense. Local rights groups condemned the attacks as part of a systemic campaign to terrorize displaced civilians, noting that the strikes deliberately targeted areas known to be overcrowded with families who'd already lost their homes. Since the quote-unquote ceasefire was announced on October 11th, and this is why I brought this, Israeli forces have murdered 354 Palestinians and injured another 900 others almost, while rescue teams have recovered 605 bodies from beneath the rubble of destroyed buildings. According to the Palestinian Ministry of Health in Gaza, Al Jazeera, and English and Arabic and independent outlets and human rights groups, the overall toll of the genocide in Gaza has been deeply minimized and reached at least 69,733 Palestinians killed and more than 170,863 Palestinians injured, the majority of whom are children and women. Except we know both of those numbers are substantially higher. Like in the hundreds of thousands higher. Thousands remain missing under collapsed buildings, with civil defense crews warning that the true number of victims is likely even higher by a lot. On top of the mass graves, on top of the 10,000 Palestinian hostages, yes, hostages, that Israel is holding prisoner without charge somewhere in a torture camp. Fuck Israel. All right, now we're also going to go back to Indie Media Award honoree Popular Resistance. This one is no surprise, but also no less disgusting. From the Adala Legal Center, okay, that over 30 new laws have been enacted since October 7th to further entrench apartheid. Over the past 2 years, the Israeli Knesset has passed dozens of new laws, the cumulative effect of which is to further entrench and deepen Israel's regime of apartheid and repression over all Palestinians under its control, both in Israel, and in the occupied territories. All of Israel is the occupied territory, but that's another story. Adallah's new report, okay, what a surprise. We're now getting hiccups on bandwidth, I see. Great. Adallah's new report, post 7th October, a new wave of anti-Palestinian Israeli laws, reviews key legislation passed between October 7th, 2023 and July 27th of this year. The laws span multiple themes, including freedom of expression, protest and thought, the right to citizenship and family life, equality and social rights, and the rights of detainees and prisoners, which we know Israel believes they have none. These new laws fundamentally violate the human rights of Palestinians, yet nobody in the international community says or does shit. While the state has legitimized these new laws by the wartime political climate that they created, that they invented, this legislation is rooted in Israel's constitutional structure based on Jewish ethno-national supremacy, which in many instances amounts to separate legal systems for Jewish Israelis and Palestinians. That's apartheid. The laws reflect and are the manifestation of the 2018 Basic Law, Jewish nation state. This is, as this new government declared in its guiding principles, quote, so disgusting, the Jewish people have an exclusive and inalienable right over all areas of the land of Israel, unquote. Sounds genocidal to me. Since October 7th, 2023, Israeli authorities have used the war, quote unquote, again, it's not a war if they're not fighting back, to accelerate these trends and consolidate Jewish ethno-national supremacy on a broader scale. This new report builds on Adallah's October 2024 position paper, which reviewed 8 bills, most of which were later enacted into laws. What a surprise. The laws were covered in these reports to join the laws already documented in Adallah's discriminatory laws database, bringing the total to about 100 discriminatory laws. Imagine in this country if there were 100 laws on the books right now that were discriminatory against Native Americans. Because that's the comparison you need to draw here, where we've stolen their land, pushed them further and further into smaller places, and then said that they can't operate in XYZ. And I guarantee you, Inhumans of late-stage capitalism is probably screaming at their computer at me right now, going, that's exactly what they fucking done. They freed Leonard Peltier earlier this year, but that is exactly what they fucking done. But imagine that in 2025, we were passing new laws to further persecute and create an apartheid state against Native Americans who have their poor community outside of the casinos and the land that they own, but they're not doing well financially compared to the rest of a lot of other communities. So to go after them, why? Like, it's either racism, it's punitive, it's bullying, it's imperialistic, and it's disgusting in every way, shape, and form. The report identifies key legislative trends. First, it documents the new amendments and the expanded use of the counterterrorism framework, which in practice is applied almost exclusively to Palestinian citizens of Israel and Palestinian residents of East Jerusalem. Except we've seen all of the Israeli residents that have the settlers that have terrorized Issa Amro's house, for example, that have gone through the streets with pogroms led by Ben Gvir and terrorized Palestinians living there. The vague definitions of terrorist act, quote unquote, and terror organization in the 2016 counterterrorism law and the subsequent amendments have become key tools for suppressing Palestinians' freedom of expression, especially since October of 2023. Another trend channels enormous state resources for Jewish Israeli reservists into new privileges, tax, welfare, higher education, employment benefits that by their nature exclude Palestinian citizens of Israel. The report also, and again, why there's any Palestinians that would want to live peacefully alongside Israelis in that land where they're already given second-class status. They're not actually given citizenship. They're not given right of return. They're just allowed to live there until the IDF decides they want to take their house. The report also highlights the institutionalization of temporary emergency measures, repeatedly renewed or made permanent, enabling widespread violations of detainees' rights and punitive conditions against Palestinian prisoners held in Israeli custody. Why are we tolerating this? Why is the world tolerating this? Well, this was never the plan. At least I didn't think that was the plan. Right? The report also concludes that the Israeli legislature is consolidating a dual legal regime that privileges Jewish Israelis while systematically violating Palestinians' rights. However, unlike historical systems of racial or religious supremacy, such as the apartheid South Africa or Jim Crow South in the U.S., most of the Israeli laws cited in the report use neutral legal language. Their legislative history and application, however, demonstrate the systematic targeting of Palestinians. So it can be applied universally if they want to, but they're only applying it to Palestinians. These laws criminalize legitimate political expression, authorize deportations of Palestinian families to where I don't know, block Palestinian family unification, permit the dismissal of Palestinian teachers, revoke Palestinian families' social welfare benefits if their minor children are convicted of what's characterized as security offenses. Of course, Israel gets to determine what those offenses are and if they committed them unilaterally with no trial or any kind of process, including stone throwing. Against a soldier that's holding an assault rifle. Expand detention powers and prolong detention, restrict access to legal counsel, and close independent media outlets, because God forbid anybody got the real story out, right? They violate both Israel's constitutional principles, not that they actually care, and its obligations under international treaties, which they also don't care about, and other countries aren't holding them accountable to. In the occupied Palestinian territory, they further breach Israel's duties under international humanitarian law because they are responsible for the welfare, well-being, and health of the Palestinian people in those territories as well. It's wow. The report references that July 2024 International Court of Justice advisory opinion, which found that Israel's prolonged occupation is illegal, and that discriminatory legislation constitutes a breach of the prohibition on racial segregation and apartheid under Article 3 of the International Convention of Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination, the CERD. All right. I thought Israel had signed off on that, but you can wipe your ass with the treaties that they've actually signed off on and agreed to, because they're not adhering to any of it. And again, there's no accountability for it. There should be a full blockade of Israel right now, because they're already doing it to the Palestinian people. Why should the Israeli people be able to have goods flow freely? It also situates these new laws within Israel's ongoing genocide in Gaza including measures restricting UNRWA operations and humanitarian aid, directly violating the ICJ's provisional measures in the South Africa v. Israel case. And we saw that the guy who used to run the IDF, who used to run Unit 8200, he admitted that he had done like a blackmail for hire. I mean, a campaign, a smear campaign coordinated against the ICJ. Other laws, such as the Unlawful Combatants Law, enable arbitrary detention and enforce disappearances, contributing to the systematic repression of Palestinians detained in Israel from Gaza. The closure of media outlets, again, such as Al Jazeera, serves to conceal atrocities and prevent scrutiny of state violence, and allow them to control the narrative. Adalah also documents additional pending bills, many of which are currently before the Knesset in its session that began at the end of October, that would even further erode democratic participation and equality. They're just ripping the mask off. There's nothing democratic about them, except what they call themselves. These pending bills would expand the grounds for disqualifying Arab Knesset parties and candidates, bar the employment of teachers holding degrees from Palestinian academic institutions. They'd be able to dismiss university staff based on political views. That's already happening here. Fuck Israel for that. Entrench West Bank annexation through jurisdictional changes. Fuck that. And tax foreign government funding to human rights NGOs, among others, which further discourages human rights NGOs from funding this stuff. A separate bill, and Reef and Colin covered this a couple of weeks ago on INN News, mandates the death penalty for killing an Israeli citizen out of, quote, racism or hostility toward the public, unquote, aiming to harm the state of Israel and the revival of the Jewish people in its homeland, unquote, even if it's your homeland first that they're stealing. Taken together, these legislative initiatives reveal that this Israeli government and parliament continue to act in defiance of the state's constitutional commitments and international law, whatever that means, reinforcing a regime of apartheid and deepening the denial of Palestinian collective and individual rights. Netanyahu does not want to acknowledge that a Palestinian even exists. So yeah, agreed with all of that. Fuck Israel. All right. I also brought an article from another Indie Media Award honoree, Ricky, over at Council Estate Media. Okay. Google Trends. Now, this one's crazy. Now, I don't know if everybody was paying attention to what was going on during the holidays, but there was this DC shooter, an Afghani guy shot two National Guardsmen in DC, one of whom ended up dying. And turns out he had worked with CIA in Afghanistan when he was a teenager. They had brought him here, and there was a lot of smoke there. But here's the thing. This is weird. Google Trends for DC and Tel Aviv expose another CIA Mossad assassination? What? In a weird coincidence, Google data shows that someone searched for Ramanullah Lakanwal before he carried out the shooting of two National Guardsmen in DC on November 26th. How is that possible? The below data shows that on November 25th, there was a spike in searches in the District of Columbia, where DC is located. There were smaller numbers of searches the following day. And again, that's the 26th. But why were people searching here and here on the 25th for his name? That's not exactly a popular name. These figures don't show the number of searches performed, but rather a popularity score assigned by Google from 0 to 100. The spike prior to the shooting was given the maximum score of 100 right there. Interestingly, there's a similar spike from Israel, I wonder why, with a score of just over 50. Again, that's before the shooting happened. You might think, and that's a great song by the Cars, but you might think it's crazy. All I want is you. You might think this is perfectly normal search activity, but you would be wrong. Long-term searches show no data, scores of 0 for months or years at a time, and then sudden spikes with scores of 100. For example, we found spikes in Israel and the UK around the same time in 2023 and 2024. Remember, these things can be planned way in advance, and they can involve multiple intelligence agencies. Here's a sudden spike on the 16th of October in the UK. Again, that's the guy. Why are they searching this guy on October 16th in the UK? Like, to the point that it's causing a 100 level interest from Google. Here's a spike from Australia on the 27th of October. Now, it could be that somebody was using a VPN and setting this guy up. But it seems like this is more than one person here. A Twitter thread shows multiple users sharing their findings in the comments, corroborating the above. You might think this is just conspiracy theory nonsense and nothing to see here, right? Well, you're kind of right, because Google memory hold it and has erased most of the search data. Because they usually do that, right? The search function is up and running for long-term data for any location over the past 5 years, but many of the spikes are gone. Some of the older results are still showing. It's worth noting that some social media users made screen recordings of their searches because they suspected this would happen and didn't want to be accused of fakery. I can name one specifically who got allegedly fired by Breaking Points this week. That's James Lee from the 5149 podcast. Google Trends currently shows isolated spikes in the UK and Israel in both 2023 and 2024 at around the same times. That's weird. It then shows nothing until after the shooting, apart from a spike in Israel from July of 2025 with a score of 100. Why would Israel know anything about this cat? However, we know that there were more spikes in the US, UK, Israel, and Australia. Perhaps the older results are just a coincidence. It's hard to say, but it's hard to dismiss the recent hidden results as mere coincidence. If you search the past 7 days for, say, District of Columbia or Tel Aviv, you'll get the above error message. Try to search on Ramanullah Lockenwall and see what happens. A worldwide search now shows 0 records for him prior to the killing. Weird, huh? It's almost like what happened with Charlie Kirk in a way, but he was famous, so he was being searched over time. You didn't have a 0 and then a spike to 100 the minute it happened and then interest falling off the way that it would normally trend. But you saw these things above. That's real. Those things were really there. People were searching Google Trends to see if people were searching for these terms, and it turns out they were. If you're still unconvinced, just look at the below. Yes, that's one of the victims, Stara Beckstrom, being searched in Tel Aviv prior to the shooting. Why would that be? Why would that be? 100 spiked interest well prior. That's November 23rd. It was before that. Thanksgiving's the 26th. Now, if vanishing Google spikes were the only weirdness around the case, you might argue that more evidence is needed. Evidence such as the shooter's ties to CIA. Well, oh, right. Our CIA director, John Ratfuck, a.k.a. Ratcliffe, cites that the alleged guard shooter's ties to CIA and other U.S. agencies in Afghanistan. Oops. He also has ties to the armed forces, Kandahar Strike Force. This cardholder is working in conjunction with Afghan and U.S. armed forces for a question. Call Firebase Gecko, and there's the number. Turns out Ramanullah Lakhanwal is a veteran of the CIA-trained and funded Kandahar Strike Force, a zero-unit, aka Afghan paramilitary force that's been accused of human rights violations and of killing civilians. He served alongside U.S. forces for 10 years and was granted asylum in the U.S. in 2021. Given that he's 29, he must have been no more than 15 when he was recruited. Despite working as an Amazon delivery driver, Lakhanwal was living in a $2,000 a month apartment in Bellingham, Washington, with his wife and 5 kids. If she's working, it's possible for them to be able to afford a $2,000 a month apartment, I would assume. Right? I cannot believe that he might do this. This sounds like MK Ultra kind of shit in a way. Lakhanwal reportedly yelled Allahu Akbar while carrying out the DC shooting. Was that what his handlers told him he had to do? It's kind of like a Tyler Robinson transgender girlfriend Antifa bullets thing. It conveniently just fits a narrative. And Americans are pushing that narrative hard. Just look at this clip from our Department of War Secretary, Whiskey Pete Hegseth. The victims were the best of America who love their fellow Americans. And the shooting happened just steps away from the White House. Oh my God, clutch my pearls. And that was a narrative, by the way, that just steps away from the White House was blanketed across that whole media sphere. Hegseth talks of deploying 500 additional National Guards. He's such a pussy. And entering other cities and of Christian values. And then he pivots to counter cartel effort and narco terrorists and peace through strength. It's all about using fear and grief to justify fascism. I'm not even going to play his nonsense drivel. He doesn't get to speak here. You have influencers like Laura Loomer, declaring that the U.S. is at war with Islam, calling for every mosque to be raided and for mass deportations of Muslims. You know, we're supposed to have both freedom of religion and freedom from religion in this country, Laura. There we go. There's one. Elon Musk argued that calling someone a fascist should be considered incitement to murder. The Trump administration calls nonviolent people terrorists and then kidnaps or murders them, but that apparently is fine if they're Venezuelan. Right? And what's even funnier is the whole fascist thing. When Mamdani was at the White House, Trump said to him, some reporter asked him, well, how do you square calling him a fascist? Do you still think he's a fascist? And Trump, who's sitting down, looks up and goes, it's all right. You can answer. You can call me a fascist. It's fine. Funniest thing I saw all week, honestly. Trump really is very funny. I can't stand him, but he's very funny. Trump is now talking of restricting immigration from the Middle East and has described immigrants as the single greatest national security threat facing our nation. He plans to examine every Afghan immigrant and send those who don't belong here back to Afghanistan, where the Taliban will surely kill them for assisting the U.S. during the war. Some of us predicted there would be false flags to push the fascist agenda, but you didn't have to be Nostradamus to see this one coming, because they kept telling us attacks were imminent, like they had a crystal ball. And they really must have had a crystal ball, because not only did their Google searches show prior knowledge of the DC shooting, but also the Charlie Kirk shooting. In the recent days before Charlie Kirk was killed, there were all kinds of weird searches related to the alleged shooter and the hospitals and doctors in the area. To be clear, we're talking about sudden spikes on terms which previously had no search data. Supporters of Trump and Netanyahu need to understand that these men, okay, have no loyalties and will hurt or kill anyone to further their fascist agenda. Wait, yep, there we go. I missed one thing. Yep. Most of the spikes, right, came from Washington and Tel Aviv. No. And then, of course, that backs up to the Twitter data that showed when the NSA? Where were they? Where were they housed? Tel Aviv, right? And then they hid the country data till it was fixed and changed to the United States. Then they restricted country data on certain agencies. Like, guys, you're just screaming the quiet parts out loud. Now, I brought one other article from Professor David Miller. It's really long. And this is from back in September, he wrote this. And I caught this on the IsraelPalestineNews.org website that republished it yesterday. And this is an article that documents all of the different methods and areas of Zionist infiltration in order to penetrate and influence an entire society to ensure that their agenda gets passed, pushed, and comes out on top. And I thought it was fascinating, and I wanted to bring it and skim through it, and I'll link it in the description afterwards on Substack. Okay, what is the function of the Zionist movement? Well, let's start with 4 statements that together define what the Zionist movement does by adding its functions cumulatively. 1, the Zionist movement creates and sustains the Israel lobby to extend its ideological and political reach, shaping both foreign and domestic policy in the countries where it operates, which is just about everywhere. It provides material support for ethnic cleansing and genocide, funneling millions each year through charities that aid in land theft and war crimes. It grooms children and youth into ideological loyalists through a vast network of schools, synagogues, youth groups, and settler recruitment programs, including birthright tours, the Massa Journey, and the Lone Soldier Program. Beyond all of this, the movement systematically dispatches its adherents into broader society as lifelong agents of Zionist ideology. This is not a metaphor. It is infiltration. This concept of infiltration extends beyond the traditional intelligence model of recruiting agents for covert missions, though that too remains a part of it. Think Epstein. It also involves utilizing individuals who are, in a sense, sleeper agents ready to be activated. That's the Sayanim. We talked about that and even references it. It was Professor David Miller who wrote that article that I read last summer about them. But it's even more than that, in the sense that in many cases, the sleepers don't even need an actual tap on the shoulder to partake in a particular mission. They're already primed to act when the interests of the so-called Jewish state are threatened, quote unquote, or even merely perceived or imagined to be. They're primed by their often decades-long experience of radicalization and grooming to become believing ideological Zionists. I know I'm related to some. In other words, this is a multifaceted and profound level of infiltration cultivated from childhood and reinforced throughout every stage of life. To understand how such a system came into being, we must first go back and examine the origins and evolutions of the Zionist movement itself. So this starts, again, prior to 1948, because this, again, did not start in 1948. Even the most hardline Zionists and the most revolutionary socialists agree on one point. Prior to 1948, the Zionist movement functioned as a coordinated political force. It organized and executed the Nakba, the ethnic cleansing and mass displacement of Palestinians in order to establish what it called the State of Israel. Zionists, of course, reject this terminology, but the historical record is clear. With its primary objective achieved in 1948, the movement briefly considered dissolving. However, at the World Zionist Congress in Jerusalem in 1951, delegates chose to continue and redefine new goals for the future. This led to the creation of the Jerusalem Program, which formally codified the movement's new objectives. Alongside it, the Israeli parliament enacted the World Zionist Organization Jewish Agency Status Law to govern the relationship between the State of Israel and the Zionist movement. That law remains in effect today, shaping the global Zionist movement's operations and responsibilities. Bet you didn't know that, because I didn't before I read this. At the World Zionist Congress held in Jerusalem on September 24th, 1951, the movement faced a crossroads. Again, this was about whether to go forward or disband. But, with new goals in practice by a vote of 286-0, with the remaining 438 delegates abstaining. So it wasn't a majority. But the ones that didn't vote just didn't vote. So you got a unanimous quote-unquote vote. But there were over 700 delegates, most of which abstained. The ones who voted yes to continue. David Ben-Gurion speaks at the 51 World Zionist Congress. They adopted the new set of objectives to reorient the movement. These were defined as the strengthening of the State of Israel, the ingathering of the exiles in Eretz Yisrael. They want to grab all the Jews from outside and bring them in, and the fostering of the unity of the Jewish people. They wanted to make it insular so that there was nowhere else safe in the world for Jews to live. That's the narrative that they were using to push all Jews toward Israel at the time, to give it legitimacy. This movement marked the transformation of Zionism from a settler colonial movement into a global ideological infrastructure. It was no longer about just building a state. It was about embedding that state into the hearts, minds, and institutions of Jews worldwide. To the point where every Jew in America, from the time I grew up in the 70s and 80s, were taught that you have, this is your home, your second home. It's not my home. It's never been my home. I never felt at home. I never considered it to be my home. I don't feel welcome there, and I don't want to ever be there or ever go there again. I have no interest in that. But I have more rights to the land there than people that spent their entire lives there right now. It's disgraceful. So at the time, the law passed by the Knesset to formalize that relationship, spelled out the obligations of both parties and designated the World Zionist Organization as the authorized body responsible for developing and settling the land, absorbing immigrants from the diaspora, and coordinating the work of Jewish institutions operating within Israel. Now that Zionists of America is a spin-off of the World Jewish Congress, by the way. It still exists today. Talked to Gen X Girl about that earlier this year. Crucially, the law affirmed that the State of Israel expects the cooperation of all Jews as individuals and groups in building up the state. That's why they call us self-hating Jews if we're against this. Because they have to alienate anyone that's not on board with their little fucking ethno-state project. Fuck these assholes. It further stipulated that the World Zionist Organization requires full cooperation, again, in its coordination, right? To that end, the law mandated the creation of a formal committee to coordinate activities between the Israeli government and the Zionist movement's executive leadership. Well, wouldn't that give like an ethno-state apartheid kind of a leg up and unfair advantage over everybody else in this quote-unquote democracy that you just created? In other words, the State of Israel and the World Zionist Organization, as a matter of law, are required to work together, and also as expressed in law, both bodies expect the cooperation of all Jews. How are they to fucking write a law of what Jews in America can do? Fuck these people so hard. The extent to which this expectation is met remains an empirical question. It should be. So, among these are, again, the preservation of Jewish unity and enduring the bond to Eretz Yisrael. Fuck these assholes. All right. The duties of the individual Zionists. So what they did was they decided to come up with like a set of laws or a set of code. Here's what we expect from you as a Jewish individual, even in another country. From 1972. Among these were the call to make Aliyah, that is, to become a settler colonialist in occupied Palestine. Others included joining local Zionist federations or affiliated groups, actively promoting the movement's ideological program, and ensuring children receive Zionist, Hebrew, and Jewish education designed to reinforce loyalty to Israel. Zionists were also expected to donate financially through established channels such as Karen Hayesod, the Jewish National Fund, or their local branches in order to consolidate Israel's economy and fund its expansionist aims, and also give it lobbying power. With the exception of physically becoming a settler colonialist, all of these duties amount to an explicit call for infiltration of host societies. Perhaps the most direct duty, however, is to strengthen Zionist influence within the community. This likely refers to the Jewish community rather than broader society, but even so, it's still a call to expand the influence of Zionism on society as a whole. Again, fuck Israel. Right, more like the Jerusalem pogrom. Yes, that's right. Go start over on Rumble. Okay, one might reasonably ask, how much attention ordinary Zionists pay to such calls? Are these dry, dead words left to gather dust in the central Zionist archives in Al-Quds? Or do they still animate the central activities of the movement today? Well, let us take a look. Here's a 1961 report from the Jewish Chronicle about a Zionist meeting in Glasgow, which came to hand as I was writing this. I present it as an example of the movement's thinking and practical activities. The meeting was specifically designed as an educational Zionist event and expounded a particular set of ideas. Okay, this is about educating diaspora children as Jews, right? And this is, the minutes say, outlining a practical program for bringing up children as Jews, Dr. Simon declared that this would have to start with the education of expectant Jewish mothers and fathers at child guidance clinics. As a result of this, children from their earliest years would be reared in an atmosphere where they would see all the symbols and customs of Jewish life observed. This would then be followed by the children being sent to a Jewish or Hebrew kindergarten and then to a Jewish day school. They're isolationists. Another important part of the program, Dr. Simon went on, would be the creation of a Jewish resurgence. In this connection, however, it was an unfortunate something for Anglo Jewry when people, it's cutting off the book. Like Rabbi Dr. Alexander Altman fled the country at a time when there was so much need of him to be here. There was also a vital need for a planned Jewish adult education program, said this Dr. Simon. All right. The adults did not education information that they would accept, but education they refused, which is weird. But again, it's indoctrination. It's not education. Oh, here. He's got it right there. All right. The measures which would be taken if the children in the diaspora were to remain Jews were discussed by Professor Ernest Simon of the Hebrew University, where he gave an address at a meeting held in the Central Hotel last week in connection with the Zionist Federation's Education Fortnight. All right. Yeah, creation of a Jewish resurgence. That's what that word was up there, resurgence. Okay. In this view, Zionist education required that children remain Jewish, making Jewish education crucial for the movement, indoctrination, and isolation the entire time. All right. And again, going back to the British Zionist Federation founded Scotland's first and only Jewish school, Calderwood Lodge. Is that commitment to inoculating Zionism still present today? It certainly is. Although Calderwood Lodge was taken over by the local authority in 1982, it remains a Zionist school today. It collaborates with the United Jewish Israel Appeal, Maccabee, Mitzvah Day, the Scottish Jewish Youth Alliance, and other Zionist groups. Gross. The UJIA is the UK outpost of one of Israel's 4 national institutions established to create and sustain the State of Israel. It serves as the UK affiliate of Keren HaYesod, which raises funds to finance settlement in Palestine. In its 2018-19 annual report, UJIA described its mission as developing a lifelong connection between Israel and the diaspora community, beginning with children as young as 4. Of 12 school programs run by UJIA, 9 are in primary schools, reaching thousands of pupils. Primary schools, like grade school. But that again, and so this again shows that lifelong connection. I wanted to show this graphic, or that they have programs to support people of all ages and to introduce you to Jews of all ages is the idea. Zionists of all ages, but it's isolationist to Jews. But what's funny is the Christian Zionists all support this. Why? Because they want Jesus to come back, and according to all their scripture, the Jews have to control Israel. So therefore, they're doing all they can to try to make that happen. It's manufacturing it. And that's why the Torah Jews are so opposed to this. That's not how this is supposed to go down. Does it work? Well, varying statistics suggest that between 60 and 90% of British Jews identify as some sort of Zionist. So, yes, it's effective. Research by Pew in the U.S. in 2021, now that's dropped significantly since, but then 8 in 10 U.S. Jews say caring about Israel is an essential or important part of what being Jewish means to them. Nearly 6 in 10 say they personally feel an emotional attachment to Israel. That's complete indoctrination. Most of them have never been there or were there for a week or 2, maybe. Most of them have never spent any significant time there, but yet they feel an emotional attachment and loyalty there? An essential part of what being... Why? Because they were brainwashed into it. Ultra-Zionists, I don't know the difference, often claim that even more Jews identify as Zionist. For example, the so-called Campaign Against Anti-Semitism conducted a survey in late 2023 that produced even higher figures that reportedly revealed that 97% of British Jews feel personally connected to events happening in Israel, which again is just a bunch of wishful thinking horse shit. 80% of respondents considered themselves to be a Zionist. Well, that alone is that they're preaching to a choir. Again, this is a really long article. Here are some of the infiltrators. Some within the movement consider the term infiltration outdated, arguing that it implies a deliberate Zionist strategy. Yet, this article has shown that such a strategy does exist. The question, however, is how conscious or deliberate it really is. The evidence suggests that there are different types of infiltration and different types of infiltrators. Okay, so he lays them out. We can begin with those directly or indirectly engaged in specific forms of infiltration on behalf of agencies to the Zionist entity, like the people that scream about pro-Israel stuff, for $7,000 a check. Their activities align more closely with the traditional sense of the term. From there, we turn to those with looser ties to the movement as a whole. In what follows, he outlines 6 types of infiltration. So you have, again, direct service to the Zionist entity. That's where they literally serve in the IDF, right? They delivered Mossad agents and weapons for subversion and assassination operations in Iran. That's the Ofer family. Another involves activities linked to Epstein, who gathered sexual compromat for Israeli intelligence. Not allegedly, he did. Mossad also relies on Sayanim. Again, we talked about this before. It's informal helpers abroad, most famously Robert Maxwell. Beyond this, there's thousands of Zionists working in the Israeli Ministry of Diaspora Affairs and its predecessor, the Ministry of Strategic Affairs. Very kind of, generic terms. Their operations range from propaganda and lobbying to trolling, doxing, and lawfare. And there's, again, evidence of all this stuff documented. One such network is the Combat Anti-Semitism Movement, which has nearly 1,000 members and operates in a joint venture with Voices of Israel, which is a company run by the Ministry of Diaspora Affairs. In total, many thousands of Zionist groups are engaged in this form of activity. It's a massive spider web of activity. Then you have tech startups, right? Unit 8200, using spyware like Celebrite, NICE, Toka, and the NSO Group, maker of Pegasus. Right? Then you have covert use of this vast surveillance apparatus by the Zionist regime has been widely noted. Investigative reports have also shown that the significant numbers of Zionist infiltrators, including former occupation forces members, intelligence operatives, and others, have secured senior positions across mainstream media and big tech. We've been covering that here at INN for years. Alan McLeod at Mint Press is famous for outing all the 8,200 people that work at Apple and at Facebook and Google and TikTok and everywhere else, and Meta and Microsoft even. Right, then you've got emissaries of the Zionist project. Right, this is also a civilian equivalent of the Sayanim, known as the Shlichim, or emissaries. That's like your Bill Ackmans. Right, these emissaries are placed in schools and synagogues and JCCs. Right. So you've got people like that. Then you've got Zionist family networks. And finally, you've got defending Zionism over the life course. Final form of infiltration is tied directly to the strategy of ensuring that all Jews make an enduring, lifelong commitment to Israel. As this article has shown, again, this has been central to the Zionist movement since at least 1951 and remains so today. Zionists expect all Jews to act on behalf of Israel whenever called upon, or whenever they perceive Zionist interests to be under threat. And I say, fuck Israel. And if they call on me, I'm going to say, fuck Israel. Practically, this means service to Zionism through daily, professional, political, and social activities wherever Zionists find themselves, in the media, political parties, business, finance, schools, universities, civil society, including the left wing and so-called anti-racist organizations. Yes, they want to infiltrate, literally. It's just, wow. In other words, Zionists throughout the social structure are engaged in subversion and infiltration. One example is the Jewish network within the UK civil service. Although set up by the civil service itself, it is in practice run by and for Zionists rather than Jews. Similar patterns exist in universities, the media, the legal professional, finance, industry, and other institutions across society. Right? When the time comes for the proverbial tap on the shoulder, how many who've passed through Zionist indoctrination will fail to respond appropriately? I'm one of them. To ask the question is almost to invite disbelief. In many cases, no tap on the shoulder is even required. Across the BBC, the media, the entertainment world, civil service, politics, finance, and other commanding heights of society, there are already Zionists who are ideologically committed. And for them, it makes perfect sense to do the right thing when the moment arrives. The fact remains that the Zionist movement encourages loyalty to its ideology and its program of action, even when these run counter to the interests of the host state, or in all cases, to the interests of its citizenry. Right? Can we trust Zionists in the end? No. Do we imagine that they're not infiltrating the left? The Palestine Solidarity Movement? The anti-war movement? Zionism is at its core a racist ideology. No matter how hard liberals, socialists, or leftist Zionists try to disguise it, that racism always reveals itself, whether in adopting Zionist positions in their professional lives or in subverting and sabotaging pro-Palestine activism in political life. Are you hearing me, Zoran Mamdani? Yeah, I said it. This has historically meant that the anti-racist movement and the Palestine Solidarity Movement have been weak on the question of Zionism. It was a major mistake for the left in the UK and elsewhere not to confront Zionism head-on earlier. Today, we face a significant struggle to cleanse the left and the anti-imperialist movement of both Zionists and Zionist assumptions, ideas that have seeped out of the movement and into the consciousness of many non-Zionist or anti-Zionist socialist activists. This process has been underway for many decades. However, this isn't the place for a detailed analysis of the Jewish left or of Zionist penetration of the non-Jewish left. A fuller exposition will be needed in another article, but for now, it's enough to point to the need for a material and maximalist anti-Zionism. All right. Again, documenting more forms of infiltration today. He closes by saying, knowing your enemy is the first step toward defeating them and toward dislodging Zionism from its entrenched status and role across society. Yes, it was an interesting choice there to use that word cleanse. Well, they've been ethnically cleansing their land of anyone that opposes them, which means that they then they're going to try to do the same thing to anyone that is of that ideology. So they of course, in turn, must be cleansed. The Zogs set you up, Sean. Very funny, right? There's just so much here. David Miller, this is a great article. There's, again, even more here than I was able to go through. Follow him on Twitter at Tracking Power. He's also on Substack. Oh, I wanted to mention, by the way, that he was fired from University of Bristol. Getting back to this article all the way at the bottom here. Sorry to scroll and make you go blind. David Miller is a non-resident senior research fellow at the Center for Islam and Global Affairs at the Istanbul Zaim University. But he is a former professor of political sociology at the University of Bristol. Again, fired for his anti-Zionism, for his pro-Palestine views. He's a broadcaster, he's a writer, and an investigative researcher. He's a producer of the weekly show Palestine Declassified on Press TV. And he's the co-director of the public interest investigations, of which spinwatch.org and powerbase.info are projects. So support David Miller. I appreciate his deep dive into exposing just how deep Zionism goes to infiltrate itself and to embed itself into all different areas of society so that they can make a phone call to, quote unquote, the right person to an ally, to someone that will do their bidding for them when the time comes. All right. Fuck Israel, by the way. One more time. All right. So, yes, antiseptics. And that's hilarious. Yes, it is. It's all antiseptic. I am very antiseptic right now, for sure. But they would just call me a self-hating Jew in this case. Gross. Because I'm not self-hating. I don't hate myself, and I don't hate Jews. It's the Zionists that are in favor of baby murder and land theft and claiming that they own land that because of 3,000 years, but they're not willing to give their home to a Native American who it was their land 3,000 years ago. So why is it only apply in this one case, but not in the other? Nobody's been able to ever answer that or square that circle for me. All right. Well, we don't get remonetized by YouTube for that. It's almost midnight, so we're going to get to our lightning round quickly, and then we will get to the GoFundMes. But please support independent media. Cash App, $, Indie News Network. Ko-fi.com/Indie News Network. We've got paypal.me/Indie News Network. We're live over at IndieMediaToday.com over on Substack. INNNewsletter.com is another newsletter that I publish there for the network that we're part of. And then IndieNewsNow.com. We're live there now. That's the name of the show. And that's because we made a website that aggregates all independent news from sources that we have vetted and determined to be highly credible and serve that to you in an ad-free environment. But there's also a place to watch the media free. There's a place to support the media you want to see and keep the media free with a Stripe link. And there is a watch live, so you can watch this thing live and get merch. You can do that too. Okay, so real quick, we've got lightning round. So first one, no surprise, we've been talking about this a lot on the show. AI's water problem is worse than we thought. This comes from Emily Atkin of Heated. She's a really good environmental reporter, little on the liberal side, I know. She says everyone knows data centers use a lot of water, but what's less known is how they can poison the drinking water that remains. Okay, it's already happening in Eastern Oregon, according to a new bombshell investigation from Rolling Stone and the Food Environment Reporting Network. Interesting that Rolling Stone wasn't putting out exposés like this the entire time that Biden was in office. They've turned into a partisan hack of an organization and an outlet. So I take this with a grain of salt, although environmental stuff, Trump certainly has destroyed a lot of environmental stuff. The precedent is Flint. That's bad. So read this article by Emily over at Heated. Again, link will be in the description afterwards. Next, Indie Media Award honoree, Declassified UK. Wow. SAS shot toddlers in their beds, an Afghanistan inquiry told. Now, this to me validates what David McBride is currently in prison for in Australia. This came from Richard Norton Taylor yesterday. Special Forces soldier with Britain feared that the elite regiment would go down the sewer unless he blew the whistle. That's brave. A senior British Special Forces officer warned that the failure to own up to their own criminal behavior in Afghanistan by the SAS, including shooting toddlers in their beds, would allow the regiment to descend into the sewer and sink to the level of despotic regimes. Devastating evidence about a cover-up by special forces was released on Monday by an independent judge-led inquiry into repeated allegations of extrajudicial executions by elite British troops. This was not reported on in corporate media to my knowledge. Explaining why he decided to blow the whistle, the senior officer told the inquiry in hitherto secret evidence, it's not loyalty to your organization to stand by and watch it go down the sewer. The soldier, who was assistant to Chief of Staff for Operations and Special Forces HQ, said, quote, "We were there in Afghanistan to bring law and order and human security and justice. We failed. Giving evidence in closed sessions of the inquiry about events in Afghanistan between 2010 and 2013. He added, quote, right now and beyond Afghanistan, we're facing off against despotic autocracies. It seems to me obvious we should not sink to their level. Good article. Again, there's a little bit more here. Declassified has reported on how the inquiry was forced on the Ministry of Defense after increasingly credible claims of cold-blooded murder, of planting weapons on innocent civilians, and deleting incriminating documents. British did that? No. They've never done that before, have they? Again, there's a lot more to this article, and I encourage everyone to go take a look at that. Next, we've got another Indie Media Award honoree, though I am conflicted about them still being Indie Media Award honorees because they've done a lot of democratic apologia in order to try to save their skins because they are desperate for funding. But Common Dreams published this article earlier this week about Tennessee and what's going on in Tennessee, and I think that most people are not paying attention to this. Librarians and publishers are alarmed as Tennessee libraries shut down for a GOP book purge. Now, this is not happening in the major cities, in Nashville and in Memphis, but everywhere else around Tennessee, the entire library system is closed for a week so that they can get rid of all books that have any reference to LGBTQ characters or themes from children's books. For popular information, again, another Indie Media Award honoree from a long time ago, though I pulled theirs because Judd Legume, he was never for Julian Assange. I had no idea, but once I found that out, I couldn't keep him as one of the award honorees. But this book purge is required to be carried out in all 181 libraries in the Tennessee Regional Library System, which encompasses most of the state aside from Nashville and Memphis. Okay? They said that they're claiming that in order to receive state and federal grants, which run through this guy's office, libraries need to comply with a Tennessee law banning DEI, all right, as well as Trump's executive order on gender ideology, which effectively ended the federal recognition of transgender and non-binary individuals. So now all that has to be removed from the library, or that library loses its funding. Fuck the Trump administration, too. Finally, I mentioned earlier that I recorded a one-on-one yesterday with Ryan Christian. He is the founder and host of The Last American Vagabond. You can find him onlastamericanvagabond.com. Another Indie Media Award honoree. All right, he's one of the best podcasters, researchers, journalists out there. That's him. Go check that out. That's at INNnewsletter.com. It's at the top right now. Okay. So that was our lightning round. And now I can just get to the GoFundMes. Before we do that, there's our Wall of Fame. If you want to join that Wall of Fame, those are the ways to do it. Cash App, Ko-fi, PayPal. Do it at IndieNewsNow.com or over at Substack, INN Newsletter, or IndieMediaToday.com. Okay. Finally, we got our GoFundMes. Chanda, over the weekend, went home. Busting out of the ICU to spend Thanksgiving with these screwballs was so worth it. We had an amazing dinner. I hope you did too. Huge thank you to Patricia and Tyler for hosting. It was a great meal. I'm getting a little color back in my cheeks. Happy Thanksgiving to all. I'm so thankful for every minute with my family. And there she is. She looks great. She's happy. She's out of the house. There she is with one of the grandkids. Nana and Jake. Nana and Hunter. Just happy to be out of the hospital. Our one and only baby boy, Cody. So, fuck cancer. We love you. Chanda. So, for Giving Tuesday, Chanda's up to 7,100. We're actually going to add to that after I go off the air. And we'll contribute on behalf of INN tonight to all of these GoFundMes because it's Giving Tuesday. I've been meaning to do that. We love you. Seriously, Chanda. It's glad to see you having some good memories, and, you know, that it shouldn't just be all about cancer every day, but to celebrate the wins and the happy days. Cowboy Kitty, I have not seen any updates from you lately, brother. But the last I had was on November 14th when he said that she's being deported for not filing paperwork on time. Pedophiles are being protected by Congress, and our economy is collapsing. Her car was out of impound weeks after she was arrested, but she sat in detention, in ICE detention, for months. I don't know if she's even out at this point and in Ukraine, or if she's still sitting in ICE detention and they're still arguing about it. Either way, it's terrible. But if you are able to and of means, Nataliya could certainly use some love to her GoFundMe for her daughter here, who Anthony said last time is still here and now kind of surviving on her own with just help from family. And I'm guessing she's got a job. I think Anthony said she's got a full-time job. But man, it's rough. And if you can help out, that would be amazing. Thirdly, we also have our friend Aspen, who we interviewed at the end of October or mid-October and did a fundraiser for at the end of October. Aspen's facing decades in prison in Georgia or federally for drug trafficking, being in the wrong car with someone who had a massive amount of drugs, but she didn't know that he had them, obviously, or she wouldn't have been in the RV with him when he was pulled over and they were all summarily arrested. This is some of her art. This beautiful butterfly. So if you have a couple of bucks and you want to support her there, you can go to Art Spend Studio and purchase some of that. Thank you to Indie Media Award honoree Paula for sharing that. Paula's one of the best activists out there. It's just phenomenal people. But there's that's the website for Aspen's art. Okay, Art Spend Studio, ARTSPEN Studio.com. There is a link tree that has a link to the studio, to the GoFundMe, which I'm about to show, to INN newsletter on Substack, where we did our one-on-one and the live stream, and then the article that Descent in Bloom wrote about her story. Okay, all of those links are here at linktr.ee/justice and the number 4 Aspen. You can get there. Aspen also did an interview, Aspen and Halo, with Sabi Sabs, who congrats to Sabi for hitting 300K on her YouTube sub list. Hopefully, and that I understand got some more attention to the GoFundMe. Thankfully, the GoFundMe last I saw, and I'll refresh it now, was sitting at $12,382, and it's still sitting at $12,382. So if you are able to and of means, they're just about at the $12,500 goal. That is so that they can hire a lawyer for discovery to find out what the state has, what they know, how many drugs there were specifically. There's a process to all of this, and the $12,500 was just to get them to the next step. Sadly and amazingly enough, this is going to be a long haul. We're going to be talking about this for months and probably for years. And hopefully what we're hoping for at some point is a full dismissal. So there again is the link directly to the GoFundMe for Aspen. So if you're able to, all right. She again was in an RV that was pulled over in Georgia. She was a passenger. There were drugs in there. She did not know they were there. And she did not know that the person driving was a drug dealer, effectively. So again, if you can help, please do. I also wanted to, no, we're not going to talk about Charlie Mack this week, although Charlie Mack 1912, his Twitter account is still suspended. If you're able to, and you want to yell at Twitter about something, reinstate both Charlie Mack. But this week, Roger Meadows got hit also. No more Roger Meadows on Twitter now. So if anyone knows how to reach out to Roger and how to get in touch with him and put him in touch with everyone, let me know in the Discord, or somewhere on Twitter, maybe. I don't know. But But yeah, Roger's good people, all about the ballot measures. Super Savvy fan, Super Hardlands fan. Kit even messaged me today to tell me that Roger got suspended. So I don't know what the plan is there. And then again, finally, we've got the IndieNewsNow website. I'll give that a refresh. Oh, look at that. It's Cash App, PayPal with his honeypot. And these are antiwar.com articles. Simplicious anti-war news for tonight from Dave DeCamp. Cheer Post, Payday Report, another independent labor outlet. All right. Caitlin Johnstone. Again, antiwar.com. And this is an infinite scroll. The more that you scroll, it will just keep giving you more articles and more articles going back. I see there was a live stream from Seven Seas. He was just talking. All right. I interviewed Seven Seas a couple times earlier this year. And you've got Palestinian photojournalists among 5 killed by Israeli forces in Gaza just on Tuesday. I didn't even get to that one. And that's Dave DeCamp over at Anti-War. So, again, Indie News Now is a wealth of resource. And there's a search button so you can actually search by a topic or by category. Okay? Again, you can break it down, articles, videos, podcasts. Get the merch there. All right, there's our merch store. And you saw that in the slideshow earlier. But this is where you can get T-shirts, beanies. It's freezing cold outside. Beanies are $20. Tank tops for those of you that live in the warm climate. I got tank tops for you. And then we also have hoodies because it's freezing out. My dial doesn't go to delicate. That's a Jesse Chet line. $27 for a hoodie sweatshirt. Where else are you getting that? All right. Thank you, everyone, for sticking with me. I love you all. Tomorrow night, watch my brothers, Reef and Colin, do INN News. That'll be 9 p.m. Eastern on all the Indie News Network channels and at INNnewsletter.com. Thursday night, I'm going to do something different, and I'm going to do the first live Indies Tech Tips, but I'm going to make it an AMA. I have some things that I'd like to talk about, but I really want to know what you want to hear and what you want to see me talk about when it comes to the tech side and production of all the different things that we put out, whether that is graphics through Canva or video editing through DaVinci Resolve or live streaming through OBS as the tool, or using these multi-stream platforms like Restream and StreamYard and how to get the most out of them. There's so many different tools that we use in this quote-unquote tech stack that a lot of people, I think, are looking to learn from. Look, I've done over 1,000 live streams and published over 2,000 Substack posts. I've got some experience in what works, tips and tricks, and what doesn't work also. Looking at analytics and numbers. I love doing all that stuff. So join me on Thursday night, 10 Eastern, on all of the INN channels. And we'll talk about tech stuff, stream decks, and microphones, and whatever it is you guys want to talk about. So before we get out of here again, one more time, that's our Wall of Fame. That's everyone that's already contributed to our network. I really appreciate everyone who's already on that wall. If you want to join that wall, the ways to do that, Cash App, $ Indie News Network, co-fi.com/Indie News Network. Then we've got paypal.me/Indie News Network, IndieNewsNow.com. I just showed you that website. And then over at Substack, INNnewsletter.com, and where we've been live at IndieMediaToday.com for the last couple hours. You can subscribe there monthly or annually. Well, have a good night, everyone. We will be back next Tuesday night at 10 p.m. Eastern for another Indie News Now Live. Subscribe to IndieMediaToday.com, and you'll get clips emailed out to you all week. And support independent media because we need it more than ever, fam. I love you all. Have a good night, everyone. No! We just fucking lost the stream!
I think I liked it better being blind when I couldn't read between the lines. And when I couldn't see the cracks in the structure that lay bare before me the whole time, I think I liked it better back when I suspended disbelief and swallowed pride. I thought I knew the difference in the red from the blue, but they both bleed us so dry. They both bleed us so dry. My favorite songs don't hit the same way. I get to the end of a 4-minute track and I'm only looking back thinking, what did they actually say? I guess this isn't such an awful place. Is that what you want me to say? You prove it's possible to sleep for days, and I still think you're right here awake. The cost of living isn't much to make, but God, it's so hard to say. And when they told you everything was safe, were you safe? Were you safe?